This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by Prize Picks coming on Monday morning. It's March 4th, and we have a losing Wolves weekend to talk about. I've not had to do this many times. They lost to the Sacramento Kings on Friday night and a loss to the Los Angeles Clippers on Sunday afternoon. We got Chris Hine, Wolves beat writer from the Star Tribune, here with us. Chris, we knew the Kings and Clippers were teams that could beat the Wolves, right? And I mean, so are the Hornets. But right. in the more classic sense of their competitive matchup, both teams, I think, in the Kings and Clippers, have things within their identity of just how they play normally that tap into some of the weaknesses this Wolves team has shown throughout the season. But it is a bit surprising. They weren't expected losses. You know, you're at home. I think particularly the Kings one, once we sat down at our seats and De'Aaron Fox is not in there in the starting lineup, I was kind of like, damn, I wanted to see a competitive matchup. And I thought Fox being out maybe would make that a clear cut, win for the Wolves. So obviously that didn't happen. And then, you have the Clippers matchup, and maybe we can start there. We know there's some things that they can do. Kyle Anderson, some of the players talked about switching defense and how that was tricky for them. But really, it seemed like in this matchup, the Clippers one in particular was less so about a matchup thing or anything. And it was just about one of the main issues with this Wolves team all season, which is the late game offense. And I want to talk about what we think about it, but we've done that a lot this season.
Yes.
I think an interesting way to look at the late game offense issue, which is a real issue. They have the worst clutch time offensive rating since Christmas, 25th in fourth quarter offense overall since Christmas. I mean, it is an issue. But I want to talk about what we think they think about it. Where do you think the Wolves are at in their heads? I know they're certainly not as freaking out as much as everybody on Twitter is or anything like that. But I think that it's fair to say to some degree it's rising, given that we're now 60 games into the season. Why don't you just answer that first? Where do you think Finch and the players and the leaders within that locker room, what are they thinking about these fairly persistent fourth quarter late game issues?
Kyle Anderson and Mike Conley and guys like that, I think, have one opinion about it, which is kind of what we all kind of see, right? I think if you were to ask Anthony Edwards about how the Wolves need to operate late game offense, you'd probably get maybe a little different take. Because I do think that Ant thinks he is good enough to rise above it all. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I think he thinks that a possession that results with him taking a step back three after dribbling a lot is a good possession, or it's not the worst possession they could have. And I think that's maybe where some of the disconnect is coming in here, right? I think just look at what happened on that last possession. I'm getting this. I get the sense that play was supposed to go for a quick two. I mean, Finch said there were supposed to be a lot of options after the game.
The preferred option was a quick two.
But Ant seemed to hint that Finchy, he said Finchy was like, go for the two if you got it, right? But Ant decided maybe I can get a three out of this anyway. And so he tried to do that, right? I don't know how much he was going off script in that moment.
The clip. I did clip that one. This is Ant, who's really into doing interviews standing backwards for the last couple of weeks. So the sound isn't great, but we can't do anything about it.
Last possession that you guys had the ball, like, how did you see it unfold? Did you want a quick two at first there? Or,
Yeah, but I mean, I really wanted a three, but I think she was like, take the two if we got it. But I wanted a three, so I was trying to get a three. I tried to turn around and hit Cat, but his man was there, so.
It turned out to be maybe just a little too late on the two by the time you.
Yeah, it was too late. I don't know. I didn't know it was 3 seconds left when I took the two. I would have just tried to step back and take the three, but it's all good.
All right, continue. Just so we let Ant Ant say his part, which he copped to it. He was like, yeah, there was an option to go for a quick two, and there was an option, to multiple options to take a three. That's what Finch said. maybe that's kind of the whole point. Is maybe options are a good idea.
Right. But that's exactly what I was going to say. Is that maybe in that situation you don't give them an option. You say we're going to get a quick 2 here, and we're going to extend the game, and that's what we're going to play for. And maybe that strikes at the larger heart of like what the offense has to be in late game moments. Is we talk a lot about like late game structure, play calling, predictability. They run action. Like if you look, they run actions to try and get the ball into Cat and or Ant's hands, right? It's what happens after that happens that the problems come in, right?
Right.
Like the goal, people will say like the goal of like late game offense, a lot of times should be like you got to get the ball in your best player's hands in a good position to succeed, and then you let the chips kind of fall where they may, right? Like that should be the goal of running late game offense. If your best players are taking on good matchups, which listen, anytime Karl-Anthony Towns is matched up on James Harden one-on-one, I would like that matchup if I were the Wolves, which is what happened on that second.
And they designed to get that. Yeah,
exactly. So I didn't mind that. I didn't mind what happened on that. I don't know that. I don't know if I think it was Tim Legler that was on SportsCenter last night pointing out that like Karl should not have darted to the corner. Like he should have just been backing Harden down the entire time. I thought that was a good point.
Yeah, but I don't know if he would have been able to move Harden like that. I mean,
that's true too. That's true too. Right. And then does a double come, like the whole, going out to the perimeter prevents a double team from coming. But anyway, it's the same problem where it's like you have Ant and Cat, and primarily Ant, trying to navigate these moments, these huge decisions that they have to make, and it just seems like it's harder for them and Ant to make the right decision in the right moments constantly or consistently.
Sure.
Right. I think, I don't know whether it's bravado. I don't think it's bravado. I think it's just, I think this is the best thing that we can do here. I can help lift the team to a win.
Right.
Like, I don't think it's necessarily quote unquote selfish when Anthony Edwards dribbles around and takes a contested shot. I legitimately think he thinks that is one of the best things that this team can do because he has such confidence in himself.
Right.
If that makes, if you get what I'm trying to say.
No, I think that's, in some world is an awesome thing, like to have your star player have belief in all of those sort of things that can be good. Obviously it doesn't work, hasn't been working great in late game, offense because late game defenses are pretty keen on it. I agree with you, but I'm going to do like a devil's advocate thing here.
Go ahead.
Like, so the clutch offensive rating sucks since Christmas, like 90, right? So that's like a 45% 2 or a 30% 3, right? Like in ways, Ant just, you just clear it out. You're on a pick and roll with Rudy and Ant comes off and pulls up the mid-range jumper. That would be better than what their offense has been in the aggregate, over the past couple months in the fourth quarter. Now, that isn't good enough still, but I think part of the issue is there aren't other good options right now in the late game offense outside of Ant, because you kind of go down, the pecking order, and maybe that is an area in which you would hope that can be, Karl, right? If they are trying to take Ant away, or you want a better shot than a contested Ant something, right? You go, okay, we can go to Karl. With Karl, it's going to look like that floater that he got against James Harden, because if you go into the post, you're going to double him. If you play from Karl from the top, they're going to really load up on his drive, right? Like, is that necessarily way better? It hasn't been. And then you have, Mike and Rudy 2-man game. And that is a pretty consistent thing. But you know what? Those two guys haven't been consistent recently. Those guys are both in their biggest slump of the season. Mike didn't make a shot again. So there is like, Ant needs to make better decisions. The overall, and he needs to drive better late game offense. But when teams kind of know Ant wants it, and that there haven't really been great alternative options, it just leads to a further load on it. And I don't know. I mean, it gets back to, I think it doesn't need to be a progression of Ant, then Cat, then Mike and Rudy. It does just need to be like, let's play. And
right.
and
Which
that,
is, yeah.
that's obviously what they need. But I think this game really like hammers that home. Like, you guys, we have to just play here. We can't, pre-script that it's going to be this Ant, it's going to be this Carl, because those things just aren't working.
Right.
At a high level.
The one possession that actually worked was when there was a lot of ball movement, the one that resulted in the Carl dunk.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, that was great.
What was that? That was a lot of ball movement, everybody getting their hands on it.
Mm-hmm.
Conley getting into the lane, driving, shifting the defense around, and all of a sudden you've got a dunk.
Yeah.
It wasn't 5 guys standing around for 10 seconds of the shot clock.
Mm-hmm.
Another point that, in just looking up the clutch numbers, that I thought was interesting, and I filtered it since the beginning of January. Yes, their clutch offensive rating, as we've noted, is one of the worst in the league, the worst. But you know what? The clutch defensive rating ain't too good either. They're 23rd in clutch defensive rating since the start of January.
Interesting.
And so that's a net rating of negative 27.7 in clutch time since the calendar turned to 2024. So I mean, moments like yesterday where Kawhi Leonard gets a back cut for a 3-point play, that's it. That's the kind of easy bucket that the Wolves rarely get in late game offense. And they've been letting teams execute their late game offense at a higher clip than they stopped them the other 43 minutes of the game. So
yeah, no, that's certainly a factor too. But I think it's a factor because whenever the defense has been bad this season, it's been a product of, almost always a product of the offense then being bad. You're not getting a good shot. It's a long rebound or it's a turnover. Like, those are going to lead into, better offensive possessions for the opponent on the other side of the floor. And that's why I think it just starts. Even though the defense is the main thing that this team has, late game basketball starts with what you can do on the offensive side of the floor. And the Wolves don't have, a ton of answers for that right now. It was kind of like the same message afterwards. We need to move the ball, but they particularly need to move the ball against the Clippers or against a team that's going to switch 5 against them, because there isn't just that advantage created by that first Rudy screen or something like that. You're not Ant now going against some big back in a drop or whatever. It's now Paul George is switched on to you if Carl comes, and it needs to be a real, like, okay, they are switching. This is how we play against this defense in this late game situation. And that is complicated. That's hard. I would imagine that's extremely difficult to need to be bam, 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 thinking on your feet how they're doing it, because that was different than how they were playing defense for a lot of the rest of the game. But I think that's what it just comes down to, is better recognition of what it is the opponent is doing, finding out what you want to get to, and then executing on that, not selfishly, but as a group. And that's what Kyle Anderson kind of said after the game, specifically about the switching defense they faced at the end of the game.
Yeah, when a team is switching 5 against you guys, where do you feel that? What do you need to do against it?
Just get into our red offense. I think they tried to force us into playing ISO ball, and we kind of did. So I think there are times where switching defenses have really hurt us, and then we have really punished switching defenses. So I think the key is just movement, slipping screens, separation on screens, whether you're picking or pop, whether you're popping or rolling, giving our teammates space to drive, things like that. We got to get that down. We're going to see that a lot in the playoffs.
That is the kicker here, right? That's what you're going to probably see in the playoffs. And that's what's leading to an overall, like, I think, particularly caught in the moment after this weekend, if you lose to, a Kings team that's a playoff team, and you lose to a Clippers team that's a playoff team too, and you go, all right, these are the type of teams that the Wolves are going to be playing in the playoffs, and this is how those teams are going to play. And it gets to the end of the game, and you can't have a great confidence in the Wolves' ability to be able to execute against those type of teams right now. When it's clutch time.
You don't. And I asked Rudy something the other day at Shoot Around, and I kind of wrote about it. I wrote about this topic, but I don't think I included the quote that Rudy had in my Sunday piece. But basically, Rudy kind of said like teams know what bothers us at this point in time, right? They know that if they turn the Wolves into an isolation team, that is how you affect the game when you play the Timberwolves. Like the book is out on how you try to beat the Timberwolves, right? So now it's up to the Wolves to counter that when teams try to do things like switching heavily to try and get them into iso ball mode. Can they prevent themselves from sliding into it? Because that's what teams are going to do. The teams are going to try to get under their skin in that way, get them frustrated, get them to stop moving the ball. And a playoff series is really going to drill down into that. You know, if the Clippers are able to come in and after 2 matchups that were spread out, you know, over the last couple of months and then make that adjustment in coming into game 3, what are you going to do in a playoff series when they've scouted you from the jump? And you're coming out game 1 with this game plan. So I think it's a fascinating kind of from the chessboard perspective of teams trying to figure out the Wolves and vice versa. And, you know, maybe in that way, this weekend was, you know, while it's 2 losses, you know, I could see this weekend even being something that really helps them get their stuff together in a way where it's like, look, this is what could happen in the playoffs if we don't have our stuff together. And if we're not minding this a little better and focusing on it a little more the last half of the season. So maybe in some ways them losing these 2 games is not the worst thing in the world, because maybe it's a bit of a wake-up call for them in that sense.
I'm a big believer in the idea that Ant in particular learns from something not working. And, you know, I've said this like bigger picture of, you know, I'm curious to see if Ant, you know, were to get knocked out in the playoffs, whatever, what is that? How does he, you know, as a 22-year-old, you know, like coming back, 23-year-old, whatever, like what does he change in recourse to having lost in the playoffs because of X, Y, and Z? And I think on a more micro scale, like this is sort of the same thing. And granted, I don't want to say Ant hasn't learned in these situations. I think he has. And then, you know, you don't maybe have one of these situations for 3 weeks, and that allows him to maybe fall back into some older habits, right? Does that feel?
Yes. I remember I kind of asked Finch that question before the All-Star break. I don't know if you remember this, but in Portland, I kind of said that. I said, you guys haven't played a game in a long time that required late game offense. I said, I basically was trying to spin it. I'm like, does that maybe help you all hit the reset button when it comes to that stuff? And he just kind of poo-pooed the question. But he, you know, I think now that we've seen that it's had to come back up in recent games here, they have not learned. They have not cleared their minds. They are the team that they were in January, and not the team that they were in November in these situations. And yeah, it's more reps, I think, is better, even if you end up losing. But I think you're right. I think Ant learns more when something doesn't work, because I don't think he came out of that Denver series thinking late game offense was the problem. I think he came out of that Denver series thinking, I need to do more at the end of games,
which was exactly what he said, you know, publicly to us repeatedly around Christmas, once teams started putting 2 on him all the time, and he wasn't able to be a late game offense high volume option, was, you know, that was the whole bullets in the chamber sort of thing. And that is where his mind goes right now in this, if this, then that. And then, you know, he kind of like, we asked him more about that, as there were times in games and fourth quarters, maybe in January, where he did get off of it and do it. And he's like, yeah, that's what I need to be doing. I need to be, you know, conscientious about when and where I'm aggressive. But I think in the larger scope here is he's still learning this stuff. Right. And this is complicated stuff. And this is difficult stuff. You're being guarded by Kawhi Leonard, you know, and they're switching 5, and then Paul George comes and switches side to you. Like, it's not an easy task that he's being tasked with. And ultimately, when the defenders are that good, it's like his job kind of in that spot becomes, who else can I get here? You know, who else can I get to score a bucket here? Because they're first and foremost focused on me. And he has to have trust in what he says all the time is like, we got Cat. He's our best offensive player. We got these other options. Like it is, I don't think it's some sort of failure or anything. These are just the things that the main guy goes through against a good team that has really good, individual.
Every night is different too. Every night is a different matchup.
That's true.
It's a different coverage that you're seeing. It's a different strategy the teams are going to deploy against you in these late game situations. And to your point, it's not like they're going through them every game. They're not going through these every game. Like when they win comfortably, they don't have to worry about running late game offense. I was joking with you guys in the press room yesterday that if they don't,
I agree.
If they don't win their playoff games in the first 45 minutes or 44 minutes, that they're in trouble. And I think that's true. I think they're gonna have to win all their playoff games as it looks right now. They're gonna have to win all their playoff games in the first 44 minutes of the game, because right now,
I don't have a lot of confidence.
Nobody trusts this team right now.
In like a boxing match, they throw a punch on offense, Wolves throw a punch. It's hard to have confidence that they can match blow for blow offensively with another team in the clutch right now. It kind of feels like it's either what you said, where they need to have established that big lead by the time it gets the last 3, 4, 5 minutes of the game, or I think this is another one, or they just score like 10 straight points in the last 5 minutes. Where they get lucky.
They get lucky, and somebody goes on a heater. Because and this was another thing we were talking about. When was the last time this team was down 4 with 3 minutes to go, or something like that, right?
Yeah,
and pulled out a win. I can't really think.
Yeah, it was the Thunder. I don't remember what the score was.
That Thunder game. The Thunder game was back and forth.
Yeah.
But that's the one example you could think of in the last 2.5 months.
Yeah,
of that happening. Right.
It's true.
Like that was the one game. It was a big one, but that was the only instance where that happened. All these other games, they've been trying to either kind of eke out late, hold on for dear life late. And they can't do it because they can't execute properly.
I want to keep talking about the Clippers game a little bit more after we grab this break, because I think it's important to acknowledge that the defense has still remained good. In the Bucks loss, the defense was awesome, and I thought probably the defense was awesome last night. We'll grab our first break here, and today's show is brought to you by Coldwell Banker and Adriana Lonick. She is a realtor at Coldwell Banker, and we know there's a handful of you out there who are doing the thing. I'm in this boat of thinking about I maybe want to be buying something, but I don't know what the entire process is for home buying. And this is exactly what Adriana and people at Coldwell Banker do to set this up. They set you up with a consultation, lay down the numbers, what this is going to look like, what your options you have are, and really just get the ball rolling for you in a home buying or home selling situation. You can contact Adriana if this is on your mind, just for a free consultation to get the ball rolling at thedancingrealtor.com has all her information there, or you can text her or call her at 715-304-9920 to book that consultation. And what we are doing is those who do book a consultation with Adriana will be entered into a drawing to get some Wolves tickets here at the end of the season. Again, her name is Adriana Lonick. She's a Wolves fan. She works with Coldwell Banker Realty, and you can contact her for a free consultation at thedancingrealtor.com or at 715-304-9920. And also quickly, wanted to let you know that today's show is also brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company. I know a lot of people were out at Falling Knife over the weekend for that Kings game in the tap room, and on Sunday against the Clippers as well. There's another game tonight, Monday, every single game, weekdays too. They have the games on. Wolves fans are going there to watch those games. So it's an option for, maybe a late happy hour, just happy hour, even before a game to do that. Otherwise, it's as good of a place as anywhere in Minneapolis to go check out games, particularly if the Wolves are on the road. Wolves are on the road on Thursday and Friday. Falling Knife will probably be popping for those games as well. So that's Falling Knife Brewing Company, Northeast Minneapolis, longtime sponsor of the show. All right, Chris, we hammered on the late game offense, deservedly so. Numbers are terrible. It's been an issue, for the entirety of the season. at least in fits and starts. I do think it was funny after that Bucks game, and you and I did we did the same thing where we after the Bucks, it was like a Bucks game and then another game over the weekend. We talked on Monday. What was the game after the Bucks?
Brooklyn.
Yeah. So we focused more on the Brooklyn game, and I never really spent a lot of time going into that Bucks game, and it was kind of similar. Where I was like, remember that first half of that Bucks game? I was like, dude, this is as good of defense as I've seen from the Wolves all season, And then stuff happens in the third or fourth quarter, typically to the offensive side of the ball, and it almost makes you forget about how good the defense was. And I thought, last night too, against the Clippers, who are another high power, star power team, and they consistently limit this Clippers offense every single time they play them. I mean, I should have put it all together, but I feel like Paul George's stat line in every single one of these games is like 5 for 18, 6 for 17. Just like they've really limited that. What was Harden was 0 for 7 or 0 for 10 last night. Yeah. And this isn't a situation of these guys just missing shots. I mean, it is I don't know, that thing the Wolves defense can do where it just can kind of, strangle an opponent. And I thought that happened as well in last night's game. And I just don't think that we should totally forget that the defense is here, even though we are pointing to these issues with the offensive play. The Rudy clip here, he kind of got into that after the game.
I love the way we competed defensively. I think we just got to find ways to execute better offensively through the fouls, through the physicality, because that's something that we can't really control, right? But we can control how we react to it. And spacing, I think we can make it much more easier on ourselves. I think sometimes we weren't all on the same page offensively, and it makes it hard, on us. But yeah, lots of good things. We gotta keep working, and we'll be all right.
It is so interesting with Gobert, right? I just think about sometimes if I was, Rudy Gobert here, and I am the reason or the main reason why this team is dominant defensively, and he can't help the offense, really. I mean, there's things that he could do better. I mean, way too many fumbles, tips, drop sort of things over the weekend, but that's just kind of baked into a lot of what Rudy's offense is. That's just his game. The offensive guys are the offensive guys, and the defensive guys are the defensive guys on this team. I think it's good that they have this baseline of the defense, but it is just all kind of a reminder of I don't know. You kind of win or lose with offense in this too, or they at least need offense in addition to it. But it is worth acknowledging that I don't think that this defense has taken any sort of drop off post All-Star break. They still seem like that number one defense with a bullet, and that's encouraging in the idea that maybe that could get them, a 12-point lead in the fourth quarter or whatever before they even get to this. But, maybe against a Kings or a Clippers team that is just more talented, that they're still going to be able to keep it close. But the defense has been good, right?
Defense has been excellent. It's no issues here. I mean, you allow 89 points, you should win in today's NBA.
Right.
Defense, I think, has been the standard of the league. It's been the standard of this team. The effort has been remarkably consistent on a night in, night out basis. I think more than any of us maybe thought coming into the year they could play defensively. And it's everybody on the roster, guys like Carl and Naz. We've spoken a lot about, the improvement those guys have made. Ant wanting to take responsibilities, big time responsibilities on ball. Obviously Jaden has been usually pretty good on a night in, night out basis, save for, a tough matchup here and there. There's, this is why I think if you could just figure out late game offense, it's because your defense is going to pretty much keep you in any game.
Pretty much in every game all season.
The Wolves do not get blown out.
Nope.
And I think in a playoff series, it's going to be the same way. I don't see many instances where a team is just going to consistently have a double-digit lead on the Timberwolves in a playoff series, right?
I agree.
They're either going to the Wolves are either going to have a comfortable lead or it's going to be a close game that gets decided in the last 5 minutes.
Right.
Which is why if you could just figure some things out on late game offense, your defense is going to give you a chance to win every single game that you are in, no matter who the opponent is, come late April, early May.
Right.
And I think that's what's so frustrating is like it's like it is the Achilles heel that they have right now. But the reason why it may show up is because the defense gives you a chance to win these kind of games.
Yeah, it gets you there in the first place.
Right. We don't talk about the late game offense being bad if they're down by 15 or 20.
True. So, absolutely. Like puts them in those situations.
It puts them in those situations.
It sometimes puts them in a late game situation where the offense has been bad all night to be like, hey, win it for us. In these last 5, where maybe it was just like last night, that was not a good offensive team the whole night, really. I mean, the start of the game, first quarter was really good. Carl was like 5 for 5. But then as the game went on, I mean, Carl had a stretch where he missed 10 straight shots. Ant wasn't, really rolling. And obviously, there's, I think particularly with those two, recently, they got a lot going on in their lives too. This past week, that's a factor there too. But I'm talking about more globally. Like this isn't the first time we've seen this sort of pattern, break out for this team where the defense drags a bad offensive night for the Wolves, and then the offense needs to win it late in the game, and they haven't really shown an ability to win it late when the offense hasn't previously been good. And I guess the defense dares them to do that almost.
The formula kind of since the All-Star break has been, they've had some of these slow starts too. But it's been like defense keeps it close first half, Ant wakes up second half, third quarter, they make their run and they win by 10 to 15 points. Right?
Yeah, no, totally.
I mean, how the Grizzlies game played out. It's how the Spurs game played out. I'm trying to remember that Brooklyn game, but I feel like that was.
It's happened a lot of times earlier in the season.
Yeah. And against bad opponents too. The other thing with those teams have in common is that they're bad.
Yeah, that's true.
When you play good teams, not as easy to do that stuff.
Right.
And so I think, I just think that the defense is going to give them a puncher's chance to advance through the playoffs.
For sure.
And, that's been, that hasn't changed since the All-Star break for sure.
We're going to, at the end of the episode, we're going to do like what's the Wolves' best path in, like, if we could choose who the 8th seed they would play in the first round is and the 4 seed, like we're going to do that. And probably, the Clippers and Kings both will come up in that. I think on the one side or the other. I do think while we're on the Clippers game, it's worth noting a couple of things. Like this has felt a little bit, and a couple of players said this after the game in the locker room. It's kind of felt like a season-long playoff series between them and the Clippers. And I just thought like the adjustments from the Clippers side that are worth noting as we, as now they've played them 3 times and they're going to play them again. Was that
next week,
Sunday, the 10th or something. But what happened in this one, which I thought was interesting and noteworthy, is 1, Zubac stunk in the game. 2, Russell Westbrook was hurt. So he wasn't out there, which they kind of use him to like put like the battery charge behind their small ball offense, I think. So you don't have Westbrook in there, which meant they played a center the entirety of the game. In the other 2 matchups, they kind of like sprung that small ball look on the Wolves for about 8-10 minutes in both of those games. I thought it was interesting. 1, they never went small. They closed the game with Tice instead of Zubac, but that's still center. Tice is going to spread out. He was trying to bring, he's going to the corner, top of the key. He's trying to stretch out Rudy a little bit, but center nonetheless on the floor there. It wasn't small ball. And I think that's what we should probably kind of expect at least until they get Westbrook back. I thought the real adjustment that did shift the game in the Clippers' favor or worked for them was leaning into Norman Powell, who's just been, as an aside, just murdered the Wolves in thus far this year, and a handful. I mean, he's made some tough threes too. Like he got a little like hot in the last game and this most recent game, or the two at Target Center, at least I can remember.
Yeah, the two at Target Center, he played really well.
But the adjustment is Powell normally comes off the bench, but they close with Powell in this game, and they pulled Terrence Mann off, and so he's on the bench. Powell kind of goes in at the 2-3 whatever, and this makes an interesting shift for the Wolves. Right, the Wolves start the game, or they're quote unquote hiding Cat on Terrence Mann.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you take Mann out, and you lose that hiding place for Cat.
Yep.
Because now it would now do you want Cat chasing around the shooter? No, you're going to put somebody else on Norman Powell to do that. So what ended up happening, and when we talked to Carl about this a little bit after the game, him and Ant had a conversation about who's going to guard Paul George, and they landed on Cat guarding Paul George, who I do think Cat did a good job on Paul George in the fourth quarter. I'm not saying this is like he got exposed or anything, but that's a big change here. Carl goes from guarding / not guarding Terrence Mann in their normal alignment, or how they started the game, how they started the third quarter, into being like, okay, you got like one of the main guys that you need to defend in isolation. And again, I thought he did a good job there, but man, I was rewatching back the last 5 minutes of this game. By Ant not guarding Paul George, or for some reason, he just looked super disengaged defensively on a handful of possessions.
And didn't Powell get loose for a 3?
Yep. And it was him and Monte Morris, and Ant was like, oh no, like you got him. And then it was just a wide open above the break 3 on the left side for Norman Powell, who was like 5 or 7 from 3 at that time. And so I think it was interesting. You would think that adjustment of like, okay, we took Terrence Mann out, Cat now needs to guard Paul George. That's where your initial alarm bell goes off of like, that's a tough matchup for anybody to guard Paul George one-on-one, particularly Karl Anthony Towns has played the majority of his career as a center. But the issue in that game, I thought watching it back, was Ant defensively. And I thought Karl acquitted himself well defensively, at the end of the game. And when the offense has this, I think you put it right, fragile. The offense feels fragile. When the offense is fragile, the defense has to be solid, and Ant needs to be just as dialed there as well, which I think is hard when you're thinking about, what do I got to do offensively for this team? I need to go through this double team and do this and that, and just the attentiveness I didn't think was there from Ant on the defensive side of the floor late in the game, and they needed that to adjust to the Clippers adjustment. That stood out to me.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I was just trying to see if they were gonna see anything or say anything thematically. I didn't because I'm like, Norman Powell comes in, lights it up. Malik Monk comes in off the bench, in the previous game, lights it up. It's like, is there anything to like these microwave sort of bench scores that you guys faced recently? Kyle Anderson just seemed to think it was mostly a coincidence. These guys come off the bench, get hot, then they close the game, obviously,
right.
Against the starting unit. But I think the Powell thing gets at something that I've thought a lot about, especially as it relates to the Kings and a potential matchup, which is like, if a team has the quote unquote fifth player that like the Wolves can hide somebody on, right? Or that they don't have to guard seriously, right?
Huge.
That plays so much into the Wolves' hands defensively, right? So big.
Yeah.
But the Clippers with Norman Powell on the floor yesterday, and then I just think the Kings overall, the way that they are configured, do not allow for that to happen.
It's a great point.
The Wolves have to honestly guard everybody on the floor against those lineups and against those teams. You think about the Kings. Like, what would the Kings potentially close with?
Close with
game, right?
Sabonis,
Fox,
Barnes, Herter, Fox,
Malik Monk.
Yeah, but then maybe he would be in place of So Fox at the 1, Monk at the 2,
Herter,
Murray. No, I don't think.
Murray.
Keegan Murray at the 3, Harrison Barnes at the 4, Sabonis at the 5. Maybe Trey Lyles at the 4 instead of Harrison Barnes if they want to go bigger or something like that.
Right.
But your point is, the point is they're going to put out a lineup there that has 5 guys you have to respect defensively.
Yeah.
And so that takes away your, Rudy lurking, right? And that's the biggest thing for me with that matchup. is Rudy's got to guard Sabonis. There's nobody else.
Right.
Like that's
And,
not you can't put like Kyle Anderson there, and you can't really do the cat guard Sabonis and Rudy lurks thing because to your point, who's Rudy lurking off of? You're going to leave Harrison Barnes wide open in the corner. You know,
exactly.
Trey Lyles wide open above the break.
It prevents the Denver playbook from being executed.
Yeah, that's what we just called that, or the Giddy,
right.
the Giddy,
or the Giddy. Yeah, exactly. Because Rudy has to guard Sabonis. Cat can't guard Sabonis because, like you said, like you're gonna leave Harrison Barnes open in the corner. Like that's a bad idea.
No.
Cat might get in foul trouble as well with how physical Sabonis is. Rudy gets a better whistle than Carl does, and I just think that and we're kind of getting into our next segment here.
Yeah.
I think the Kings with how they are constructed just seem to be able to poke at the Wolves' weakness on the defensive side of the ball, maybe a little better than other teams can. And we just got through saying how great the Wolves' defense is, but twice now the Kings have been able to kind of get under their skin a little bit in these two matchups at home at Target Center, and I think it's because of how just their roster's built. I just think they have the personnel that makes the Wolves come out of their comfort zone just a little bit on the defensive end of the floor. Now, the Wolves did not seem overly concerned about this.
That's what I was going to say.
After the Kings game.
So I'll set the scene. I'll set the scene.
Ahead.
So Chris goes, beat writer, right? He's like, okay, I'm looking at it. This is the only team in the league that's beat you twice at home. They won the season series that the Kings did against the Wolves. And so you're asking the question of, does this team present a particular weakness because they beat you more than anybody else has this season? There's one player who pointed to something that they do, that makes it difficult for the Wolves. But for the most part, everyone answered like, no, we think we actually match up well with them.
Yeah.
It was interesting.
Yes, it was. Jaden McDaniels got King's Twitter riled up with his answers, saying, "I think we could beat these guys 4 times in a row."
Jaden just with his little quiet, like,
I ain't really worried about them. Yeah. They're very quiet, but like the most trash talking thing anybody said after that game. But yeah, never have I had more Kings people in the mentions on Twitter than I did after that quote got tweeted out. Rudy, to your point, Rudy kind of said the whole Sabonis thing. It's like, well, they're used to having people double Sabonis and then getting open looks off of that. We don't.
This one was interesting.
This is where the chess match is like. It's like, all right, well, but you have to guard Sabonis.
Yep.
Meaning that your attention is occupied and they can do other things in and around that.
See, and that's double pronged, right? It's one. You then why Rudy said it was a good matchup. Sorry, I don't have this one clipped because it's from 2 games ago. But Rudy said it was a good matchup because he goes, I can just guard Sabonis 1-on-1 and everyone can stay home on shooters.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's 2-pronged because one, he needs to be able to guard Sabonis, which he has not shown ability to be able to do at a high level in the one-on-one situation. No, that is not the opposite. Is happening in that a little bit less so on Friday than the game before, but like Sabonis with force can get to Rudy when there's 4 guys spaced around him and he's just doing his battering ram Sabonis thing. Like that works. But also it takes Rudy out of the lurk, and out of the Denver matchup, out of the Giddy. And so it's like, even if Rudy can really contain that Sabonis matchup, you've lost in that matchup. You've lost that thing that takes the Wolves defense from really good to like supernova good, which is Rudy helping and doing that. And I think that is when I think about the Kings matchup in terms of the Wolves defense, that's the biggest thing, that they lose that as an option to be able to go to pretty much at all, because to the Kings' credit, they play fast and they have shooters out there.
And how many times do we see that the Kings took advantage of this to get second chance points too? Like I remember a number of times, especially early in that game, where like the Wolves cut off a cutter because whoever was guarding him plus Rudy kind of prevented them from getting a good look at the rim. But then Sabonis is literally standing there in the lane, untouched, unboxed out, grabs an easy rebound and puts it right back in for an easy 2. That happened, I want to say, like 2 or 3 different times in that game. And then, of course, they had the issues rebounding late in that game despite having Nas, Carl, and Rudy on the floor at the same
Right.
time. So and they'll get out and run on the Wolves a little bit, like
Yeah.
I just think that that's tough. It's a tougher matchup than I think the Wolves are thinking.
I wrote down defensive rebounding, frenetic Kings pace, and Malik Monk were the things that did them in that game. And I mean, Malik Monk's having a really good year. Probably gonna win 6th man of the year. You're probably not gonna. I mean, he had 4 points with 2 minutes and 40 seconds left in the third quarter. Finished the game with 39. Got on an absolute heater, and in a lot of different ways. It wasn't just all like one thing they were attacking. Monk just played great in that game, and they need to shut that off more than they did. But to the defensive rebounding point and to your Sabonis thing, what I was noticing when I was rewatching that game is we always think about when a pick and roll happens and it's Rudy or it's Cat and the big gets switched onto a guard, you go, uh-oh, big guy on a guard who's faster than them is going to be able to burn them. Well, that's not really a issue for the Wolves. Like Rudy can defend in isolation, and quite frankly, Carl's acquitted himself pretty well in isolation stuff. His defensive things at the 4 are much more about chasing and that sort of stuff. I actually thought Carl did a pretty decent job switching on to Monk. He had a big stop in the at the end of the fourth quarter on Monk, and then to the Paul George part. Like Carl's decent enough at keeping the guy in front of him, and Rudy, he can really lock someone down, a guard in that isolation situation. But it's interesting in that matchup, once that switch happens, now Sabonis is being guarded by the guard, right? Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels.
That's where they attack.
And it's even just Sabonis just sits under the rim there, and he's like, okay, like set a screen for Malik Monk, who Rudy switched onto him. Monk took a difficult contested 15-footer, missed it, but Sabonis grabbed it, put it back in for a layup. It's the backside of the switch with Sabonis that's a problem there too, particularly on the offensive glass. And that happened a lot in like the first quarter. And I feel like allowing offensive rebounding with this Wolves team is contagious. Like if it starts happening early, remember back like the last year, D'Lo year, like if it would be like, if it was the first quarter and the opponent would get like 6 offensive rebounds, it was just going to be one of those nights.
Yeah.
And the Kings game kind of felt like that too, because there wasn't the intention to, remember we used to hear the word all the time, sandwich box outs, that sort of stuff. Like you just need to do that to Sabonis. He's as good as it gets on the offensive glass. And Ant can't just do like the one arm kind of like try to push him away and out jump him. It's not going to work. Sabonis is going to hit him, grab it, go back up for a layup there. So defensive rebounding, I thought was huge. And the other one was pace. And when you asked Mike Conley, is there anything that this Kings team does? That was the first thing he said. He's kind of said the pace can dysregulate the Wolves. And he was the only one to really go into that. That personally, that stood out to me a lot.
That stood out to me in both games the Kings won this year.
Those were my questions after the Kings game was about pace and what that does, because you watch the Wolves against a high pace team, and this will be actually interesting to track against Indiana on Thursday as well. It just, when it's a high pace team and they get going and playing at their high pace, the Wolves kind of oblige and do that. And they're not a fast paced team. They're as slow as it gets. And when the pace starts being a high pace game, it really is advantageous to the opponent. Was it 19-0 and fast break points?
Both games. Yeah, both games were the same. Yeah.
I mean, good luck winning, man. That's just the pace hurts. Pace hurts.
That's what I mean. It's like, it's just for whatever reason, the Kings were able to do that, and the Clippers too, to a certain extent yesterday as well. But like, both when it happens twice was my thing. It's like the way the Kings beat them in November, from what I recall, looked a lot like how they beat them on Friday night too.
Totally.
Like it was kind of the same. I mean, they shut the lights out in the first half of that game in November.
Right.
But overall, they were getting good shots.
It was Fox at the end of that game, and remember they were running that really high pick and roll. Like Sabonis would come up like 30 feet, and it would just was fast. It was downhill fast, spraying it out all over the place. And then in this one, no Fox in the game, but they kind of did the same thing with Monk, just like get him in action, going over and over again, and the pace and not really having an answer for that action did seem to
Yeah,
electrocute them a little bit.
Yeah, it just makes the Wolves a little more vulnerable on defense than they otherwise might be. The Wolves, listen, especially when it comes to the rebounding stuff. I just looked it up. The Wolves have done a great job overall, really improving their rebounding. They're 5th in defensive rebounding rate overall this year. Like they've made a lot of strides
for sure
in that area from a year ago, which they absolutely had to do. But it just, for whatever reason, the Kings exposed those little issues that I in a way that we haven't seen the team really do this year outside of like New Orleans when Zion played.
I wouldn't even put Oklahoma City in that. I mean, Oklahoma City beat them twice. Those two, in my opinion, the Oklahoma City losses felt a little bit more self-inflicted than the Kings losses did. Does that make sense?
The second, or the one at home against Oklahoma City was a self-inflicted Wolves loss.
Yep.
The one that they had where Oklahoma City won comfortably in Oklahoma City, I'm chalking that one up to the schedule. And because that was the day after Christmas. They had beaten the Kings on the 23rd in Sacramento, flew back to Minnesota so their families could be there for Christmas, flew in late to Oklahoma City the night of the 25th. And then had to go and play the Thunder the next night. That to me was a schedule loss more than anything else, and just their travel itinerary. So
point being not
matchup,
exclusively matchup,
not exclusively matchup. So when I look back on the arc of the Wolves this season, I almost throw that first Thunder loss out the window.
Kind of like the Suns one too.
Yeah. I almost
which people are gonna be like, you're throwing out all the all the losses to the good teams. Well, those two were particularly because the Suns one was the 22-hour back-to-back.
That was a tough one.
Kings feels different. That's the
point. The Kings losses felt different. There was no schedule reasoning for what happened in each of these games.
Right.
And as we may get into here, the Pelicans games were also that way. Zion played in both of those losses.
Well, let's get into this. We were sitting around at dinner last night, and we're basically talking about what we've been talking about on the podcast here. And you're like, well, let's just talk about what the best path matchup wise, in our opinion, is that the Wolves could have, and what a worst one could be. And for this, we're just going to assume they're the 1 seed, right? And so.
So we can kind of cherry pick the matchups.
Yes. Yeah. So who is if they're the 1 seed, we'll start with best path. If they're the 1 seed, who's the best 8th seed for them to face? And then in the second round, who would be the best top 4 seed for them to face? And then conference finals, who would be the best one there? For me, the best path, I think it's just unfortunately a tough year in the West. If you get the 1 seed,
right? Yeah.
You're not getting a freebie. Historically happens. I mean, I just think about so many years in the past where it's like the Orlando Magic were the 8th seed, and like the Eastern Conference is like, oh, weird, Philly swept them. There's not one of those this year. That would have to be like Houston or something, and Houston's not going to very unlikely to be in the mix here.
No.
So the way I think about best path for the 1-8 is Warriors or Lakers, and I'm going Lakers.
Okay.
I think
I'd go Warriors.
The best. Why?
I think the Wolves can shut everybody else down on the Warriors other than Steph Curry. And I don't think he's going to win single-handedly a series against the best defense in the NBA. I think the Wolves are just well-suited to just put the clamps on everybody else on that team.
Right.
That's why.
I think we're both in agreement that those. Well, would you say the second?
I would put the Lakers second. Yes.
Okay.
So then, number 2, right?
And we're basically in agreement here.
Yeah.
I will say with the Lakers one, it gives me a little bit of pause from the size perspective, and AD also that's another one where Rudy's going to have to guard him.
Yep.
And he's going to play from that mid range a little bit, which can be tough for Rudy to how much do I want to be contesting that if AD is 6 for 9 from the mid range, it's going to be, that's going to be hard for them to handle. They're going to, they have some size that counteracts. They have a lot of size that counteracts some of the advantage they have there. I think a lot of people are going, oh, I don't want to play the Lakers or the Warriors just on the legacy stuff. Maybe those teams getting better whistles, whatever. I just think those are clearly of the top 10 teams. Not clearly, but in my opinion, I think they're the two worst there. And you're kind of looking at Steph or LeBron either way.
I think
you're looking at
the fact is they're being propped up by their stars because the teams around them are just not that good.
Exactly.
And the only reason they are where they are is because Stephen Curry is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
LeBron James is awesome. And
Mm-hmm.
like that's it.
Yeah, and I'm going to take that over
Yeah.
a Kings team, which I think has some specific matchup stuff that we just got into. Pelicans, like we've talked about before. That would be my start. So let's say, Warriors or Lakers in the first round. Say the Wolves win that series, and they are now playing one of the top 4 teams. Which of the top 4 teams would you think would be the best matchup then to face after playing the Lakers or Warriors?
Man, that's where it's like, I don't know. Do you want
kind of what we were just talking about?
I know.
I think it's Thunder.
I think it's the Thunder too. I mean, but do the Thunder fall to the 4?
It's not.
Listen, I know we're going through this exercise. But yes. If we're kind of ranking, like, do they want to play the Thunder, the Nuggets, or the Clippers?
Yeah.
Kind of in that tier. I guess I'm with you. I would say the Thunder first.
Yeah, it's not. These aren't good options,
right?
Like this is a good team. It's tough. I'll pull the standings up here.
Yeah. But I mean, you could play a 5 seed in there, and that's the Pelicans right now, right? I wouldn't want them to face the Pelicans.
Okay, well, let me ask you that. Would you rather face the Pelicans? So let's say it shakes out. The Wolves are the 1 seed, right? In this hypothetical for us, let's say it's 4-5 Thunder Pelicans. And the Wolves somehow sweep the Lakers or the Warriors in the first round. And you're sitting there and you're waiting to face the winner of the 4-5 matchup, and it's Thunder Pelicans. If you're the Wolves, who do you want to come out of that?
Well, it depends on how healthy Zion is. If Zion's healthy, I think just based how those 2 games went, I think the Wolves would want to face the Thunder. I don't know, man. Like, those 2 Pelicans games were the only time this season, aside from these Kings games, the only time this season where the Wolves never had a chance of winning either of those games. They were never really in those games. The Pelicans controlled each of those games from start to tip that Zion played. And now, okay, we get into a playoff series, things are maybe a little different, but that wasn't the case against the Thunder. Like, I don't know. Just from a matchup perspective, like we talked a little bit about like these bigger kind of 4s, given the Wolves' issues, and Zion is like the prototypical 4 in that sense. It's like he's too big. He's too big for Jaden to guard. Ant's too small to guard him.
Or does that shift at all? And you like. He guarded Zion some in the last time they played him. He guarded Jaren Jackson Jr. Like,
maybe. I don't know, man. I don't know.
I'm gonna go
Zion at the peak of his powers, like, will give them a lot of trouble.
I mean, and I've been talking about that for 2 months, so everyone knows I agree with that.
Right.
I think I would rather get the Pelicans than the Thunder in the second round, because I think the Thunder have been, the more talented and more consistent team. Like I do think,
and that's fair.
Pelicans
and
would
that's
just
absolutely
fumble a game or 2.
Right.
Like
I don't
feel
disagree.
confident in that.
I don't disagree.
But
it's
close. Yeah,
it's closer than you might think, just given the record. Like, okay, the Thunder are currently 6.5 games ahead of the Pelicans in the standings. You would think, you don't want to face the Thunder, right? But also,
how are they going to guard the Pelicans? And that is the
and that
who's guarding Zion for them? And they got Valanciunas too. Like from a size.
New Orleans has a lot of size to really compete with Oklahoma City in that way. And then we're spinning it forward to round 3.
Western Conference Finals.
I mean, I just wouldn't want to face the Nuggets just because they won the title a year ago, and Nikola Jokic is the best player in the league. And the Wolves have shown that while they are a good matchup, I think, for the Nuggets overall and have a chance in a series against them, they really have shown an ability to shut down the Clippers in these 3 games. So I don't think that's a fluke. I don't know what you can do chessboard wise to open that up, because I just think the Wolves are very well suited to defend the Clippers and how they want to play.
No, I'm with that. I think the Denver Nuggets are the best team in the Western Conference. And even though the Wolves can put Rudy Gobert on Aaron Gordon and have Cat guard Jokic, and that seems to help them, has helped them for sure. I just think they're kind of in a class of their own in the West right now. And in my opinion, I think they're leveling up at the right time. So they're going to be my last choice of any team to play. And when we do the worst path, like they're going to be part of the worst path. That's just today, March 4th or whatever, what I'm kind of feeling about this. So yeah, I would say best path for me is Lakers, Pelicans, I guess, if I can do that.
Yeah, you can. It's our episode. We can do whatever the hell we want, Dane.
That's true.
That's
true.
You could say, oh, the Mavericks get hot and get the 5 seed, and then that's the best matchup. But we make the rules here, Dave.
That is true. That is true. But, so I will.
Yes.
I will say, if it has to be one of the current top 4 teams in the second round, my first choice would be the Thunder.
Okay.
And then between Lakers, Thunder, Clippers.
Okay.
Would be mine, and yours is Lakers.
I would go Warriors.
Oh yeah, sorry, Warriors.
Warriors, Thunder, Clippers.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And now worst path. The Kings fall to where they are in the play-in in that 7-8 mix. They're currently tied for 6 with Phoenix. So the Wolves get the 1 seed, and again, we're playing so like the Wolves have the 1 seed. The Kings are then in the playoff mix, lose, play in game number 1, and then get the 8 seed. That to me is the toughest 1-8 matchup for them that's on the slate. Keeping in mind that we don't really know how they're going to look against Phoenix in the last 2 matchups of the year. Yeah. Phoenix could throw some curveballs out there as well. So I'm going to put a little asterisk on there because I want to see how these Phoenix games go. But the Kings have shown that they can give the Wolves some fits. So that's the worst 8. That's the worst 7-8 slotted matchup.
Would that be what would you say the Kings are a worse 1-8 matchup for the Wolves than the Pelicans are? If the Pelicans could be there?
If the Pelicans ended up in that tier, then I would rather the Wolves. I think it would be better for them to face the Kings than the Pelicans. But those are 2 of the worst matchups to me for them. So I would. So if you're throwing the Pelicans in that group, I'm putting the Pelicans as the worst 1-8 matchup, slightly ahead of the Kings then.
Yeah, that's an interesting one between the Kings and Pels. And I guess we could put both of them there.
Look, the Wolves, I'm trying to think, like, even last season when the Wolves beat the Pelicans, I don't think Zion played. When Zion played, the Pelicans won. Yeah. Like, when Zion Williamson plays, the Pelicans tend to win against the Timberwolves.
And it's very clear what he can get to that the Wolves can't stop, or that's what it's been. I agree with that. I think I would have Pelicans as a worse, and not to get caught in the recency of the Kings thing, because I think that's easy to do. Maybe if they just lost to the Pelicans,
right,
maybe would have for sure picked that. So so I'll take Pelicans too as the worst first round matchup, and then if we're choosing from the top 4, the next one we both would say is Nuggets.
Yeah. Denver in round 2 would be very tough. That would be like where it gets into the realm of, like, if they lose in round 2 to the Nuggets in a tough series, like,
moral victory.
Was it a moral victory? Is the season not a failure? Like not a failure? Do you run it back if you lose a 7-game series in round 2, especially if the Nuggets maybe go on to win the title or get to the finals? Nuggets in round 2 would be pretty bad, and then Clippers. I guess Clippers in round 3,
just because we think Clippers are more difficult than Thunder.
Yeah,
That's where we're at on this. Yep.
More veteran experience. Kawhi's won multiple titles. Somebody who knows what it takes to win, and that's and the Thunder are very young. So
and I was trying to think of like, are we going to get any more information on this stuff? The Suns won, you're right, they played them a couple more times. They played the Nuggets 3 more times,
right? We kind of have a feel for the Nuggets though at this point. It's like we kind of know what that's going to look like. It feels like Dallas is the team we haven't really discussed here. And I think we both feel like the Wolves match up well overall.
Still Luka.
But it's still Luka Doncic, right? Exactly. It's still like a singular entity who can really command a game like almost nobody else can in the league at this point. So,
and I haven't watched them much since the deadline and when they acquired those guys, but just from, it seems like that has helped, and they are like, they got the green arrow going up. Too. It's like, I mean, pretty much all of these teams in the top 10 right now are like kind of trending in the right direction, Maybe the Suns not, just injuries and kind of weird all year, but like, I mean, the Warriors are playing well. The Lakers have been winning some tough games. Like, it's just, I mean, once we actually have this conversation, it is just a hellish Western Conference, and it just sucks if you're the Wolves or the Thunder too. If they get the 1 seed and not being rewarded by having an easy opponent in the first round, it's
like, okay, Thunder, you're the 1 seed. Okay, here comes LeBron James and the Lakers and round 1. Like,
the point is crafting these paths for any team in the Western Conference is going to come up with some uncomfortable, like the best path isn't going to be all that great, and the worst path could get pretty hairy.
That's exactly it
for pretty much every team.
But that goes to the point of like matchups matter so much, and how you're able to expose a team's weakness,
particularly for the Wolves. It feels and advantageously too. Matchups can matter for the Wolves.
I would agree.
Given their weird roster.
So getting the 2, like if they end up as the 2 seed, you're maybe a little disappointed they're not the 1 seed, but if that means you end up playing again, let's say the Lakers or whoever, Dallas in round 1, as opposed to not getting the Kings or the Pelicans who maybe drop to 8, then is it really that bad that you didn't get the 1 seed? I don't know.
Yeah, well, it just comes down to what everyone's subjective feeling is about how much the matchups matter, how hurtful matchup X is versus Y. And then also, like, we come to a lot of conclusions based on studying the regular season and the matchups that have happened. But the playoffs can be a different sort of animal. Like, there's a lot of in the regular season with these matchups, like we were talking about. The one time they played the Suns was after that headlock Draymond game, and then 22 hours later they had to travel from San Francisco to Phoenix to play. Like, there's just a lot of stuff that clouds like
a regular season matchup.
So when we look at like, oh, they played the Suns 3 times this year, they played the Kings 3 times this year. Like, there's gonna be plenty of different things we can point to. A Cat didn't play in the first game, Fox didn't play in the last game. All of these different factors in there. So I don't know. Ultimately, it comes down to feel. And ultimately, I think the way to think about it is, what variable do we know best? The Wolves. What have been their trend lines throughout the season of what they struggle with? And then I think you're applying that to the other matchups versus having an assumption about what those other teams are, because you just sometimes it's hard to know. It's hard to know.
We don't get a big sample of viewing their opponents throughout the course of the season. We're not watching dozens of their games. We're watching a handful of their games. I mean, you Mr. Film over there, you do a little more, watching of the other games than I do. But on the whole,
I am intentional about it, and I will admit that, like, I mean, what I do is I watch like the team that they're playing next, their previous game. It's just, we can't be covering a team full time. We joke about this all the time with the award voting, right?
Right.
And it was part of the reason why you don't vote anymore for NBA awards was because you're like, one, there's a little bit too much money and stuff tied to that too. But what you and I have talked about is like you as a traveling beat writer being able to like levy an opinion on who should get second team all rookie. Like that's not your niche. It's not mine either because we're watching the Wolves all the time, right?
Yeah.
It's like how can we, know some of all of these things? I bet you if there's some Thunder or Kings or Pelicans fan listening to this now, they're like, oh, you don't know this about the team. And like hand raised, we don't.
We don't, right? Yeah.
We're going off of predominantly what we've seen and the handful of other games. That we've watched.
By the way, just out of curiosity, while you were talking, I swear to God, I was listening to you. I did not tune you out. But I just out of curiosity, I was like, let me go back to the clutch stats really quick here, and let me just look at offensive efficiency in late game offense. And looking at where all of those playoff teams are ranked in the Western Conference, right?
And this is for the whole season.
This is for the whole season, right?
Okay.
Nothing of late, whatever. 7 of the 10 teams that are going to likely make the Western Conference playoff pool are in the top half
of these 10 teams.
Of these 10 teams. 7 of them are in the top half of offensive efficiency and clutch time this season. The 3 that are not are your Minnesota Timberwolves, Phoenix Suns, and the New Orleans Pelicans. Yes. They are both in the bottom third. Everybody else, 14th or higher.
Interesting.
With the Thunder being number 1. Dallas being number 2. And the Utah Jazz, oddly, being number 3. But
good coaching, maybe.
Yeah, right. Yes.
Yeah. No. That's
Lakers are up there. Warriors are up there. Clippers are up there. Clippers are 5th. Nuggets are 7th. These are teams with players on them that lend themselves towards executing down the stretch in the way the Wolves.
They're not going to go into the playoffs with when they're making their list of X factors. Be late game.
Like, what do we do in the late game?
And that is going to be top line when we're previewing Wolves Kings for the 1 8 or 2
bullet point yes. Number 1.
Seriously,
late game Wolves late game offense. Yes.
Seriously, that's what we'll be on on this here. Okay, all right. We've gone
this is a long one for me.
Yeah, well this is what we do. We play we had 2 games, We had a couple of clips, but he's Chris Hine. You guys are following him on Twitter at Christopher Hine. Was that your Sunday piece that was on the
Sunday
matchups?
Piece? Yeah. Well, I mean, it was just like basically the premise of it was at the end of the day, the Wolves' biggest opponent is themselves, because I don't feel like there's a lot of teams that will out and out beat them in the Western Conference. Like they will be in a lot of these games and then they will beat themselves ultimately at the end of the day.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, you're taking? I won't see you at the game tonight, right?
I want to take the night off.
There you go. Good for you. Yes. I wish I was. Blazers. But we will see what happens in this Blazers game. It is one of those kind of like no win can only lose situations, but they should be able to take care of business against the Blazers, and honestly use that as kind of like a palate cleanser for the weekend. Like take care of business against the Blazers. I think the Blazers are sitting a lot of guys. Yeah, it's a couple days off before a tough stretch. Pacers, Cavs, Clippers, Lakers. So it'll be very good to go into that run. And I feel like this team needs a run right now, man. I was thinking about that last night when I got home. I'm like, everybody was tired in there after the game. And there's a little like they need something to kind of prop them up right now. And I think it goes a long way if over this one game and then the road trip there, if they can win like 4 or 5 of them, that'd be huge just to kind of get back onto that's a hard task. It's 4 tough road games, but I feel like this team, kind of needs that right now to get back onto the track that they were. And we will see. We will see if that happens. He's Christopher Hine. You're following him on Twitter at Chris Hine, beat writer for the Wolves. I'm Dane at DaneMooreNBA. I'll be back with Jace on Tuesday morning to discuss Wolves, Blazers, and probably a couple of things this weekend. Until then, he's Chris. I'm Dane.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah. Hope you dancing like